Madam Clerk?
Members of the Senate, please be seated.
Will the Senate please come to order? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Senator Baker? Here. Senator Chang?
Here.
Senator Dela Cruz? Senator English? Senator Favela? Here. Senator Gabbard? Senator Ihara?
Present.
Senator Inoue? Senator Kahele? Senator Kanuha? Senator Keith Agaran? Senator Keoho Kalole?
Bill.
Senator Kidani? Senator Kim? Senator Moriwaki? Senator Nishihara? Senator Rhodes?
Present.
Senator Riviere? Senator Ruderman?
Aloha.
Senator Shimabukuro? Senator Taniguchi? Senator Thielen?
Here.
Senator Wakai? Mr. President,
Present.
all 24 members are present.
Thank you. The chair has read the journal of the preceding day and approves the same. Are there any introductions this morning? If not, Madam Clerk.
Governor's message, numbers 866 and 867, withdraw nominations to the Tax Review Commission and the Correctional Industries Advisory Committee. Governor's message, numbers 1103 and 1104, inform the legislature that the governor signed various bills into law as Acts 2 and 3. And Governor's message, number 1105, informs the legislature that the governor signed Senate Bill 3139, House Draft 1 into law as Act 4 with a line item veto.
File. If there are no objections from the members, we're going to take third reading out of order.
Members, we're going to move to page 25 and 26 of the order of the day. It's the last two pages, and we're taking third reading.
If there are no objections from the members, we will be taking third reading on consent.
Third reading of House Bill 1805, Senate Draft 2, relating to prescription drugs.
Is there any discussion? If not, do we have unanimous consent?
24 ayes.
Thank you. House Bill 1805 SD2 passes third reading.
On page 26, third reading of House Bill 1819, Senate Draft 3, relating to hemp.
Is there any discussion? Senator Gabbard.
Mr. President, I rise in strong support. Will you please direct the clerk to insert my floor comments in strong support of HB 1819 HD2 SD3 into the journal?
So ordered.
Mahalo.
Is there further discussion? Senator Thielen,
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise with reservations.
please proceed.
Thank you. I support the creation of a robust hemp program in Hawaii. I would like to just see it legalized. That said, I do want to express reservations because this bill includes buffer zones, which I think is a dangerous precedent to set in the agricultural district. We have a right to farm law, and what that means is that farmers on agricultural lands are allowed to farm, which sometimes can be noisy and smelly and messy and dusty. And people that are living in either fake farm residential subdivisions or adjacent residential subdivisions are often complaining. So I hate to see us opening the door to creating buffer zones because it's going to make farming practically impossible in my district in Waimanalo, where the lots tend to be fairly small. This bill does have a sunset period. So while I will not be in the legislature in 2 years when it does sunset, I'm hoping that if there is a continuation of the hemp program, that this legislature eliminates the buffer zone requirement and instead moves forward with maybe some more practical rules adopted by the Department of Agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? If not, do we have unanimous consent?
24 ayes.
Thank you. House Bill 1819 SD3 passes third reading. Senator Ihara?
Mr. President, could you note my reservations on the bill?
So noted.
Senator President, did you note my reservations on the bill, please?
Sorry, reservations for Senators Thielen and Ihara on that vote. Reservations for Senator Nishihara.
24 ayes.
Thank you. House Bill 1819 SD3 passes third reading.
Moving back to page 2 of the order of the day, House Communication Number 384 informs the Senate that the House has disagreed to the amendments proposed by the Senate to various House bills. And House Communication Number 385 informs the Senate that the House passed House Bill 285, Conference Draft 1 on final reading.
File.
House Communication Number 386 and 387 inform the Senate that the House adopted House Concurrent Resolution Numbers 26 and 147 for one-day notice.
So ordered.
On pages 4 through 8, House Communication Numbers 388 to 416 return various Senate bills which passed third reading in the House in an amended form for agree, disagree.
Members, we will take motions to disagree first and move to motions to agree.
On page 6, House Communication Number 402 returns Senate Bill 2561, House Draft 1, relating to consumer protection.
Senator Wakai.
My apologies, President. I move that the Senate disagree with the amendments proposed by the House to Senate Bill 2561.
Senator Kahele.
I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussions? Any objections? If not, the motion is carried.
On page 5, House Communication Number 396 returns Senate Bill 2329, House Draft 3, relating to ignition interlock devices.
Senator Inouye.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate disagree to the amendments proposed by the House to SB 2329, Senate Draft 2.
Senator Kahele.
I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, so ordered.
On page 4, House Communication Number 388 returns Senate Bill 2060, House Draft 2, relating to coastal zone management, which passed third reading in the House in an amended form for agree, disagree.
Senator Gabbard.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate agree to the amendments made by the House to Senate Bill number 2060, SD2.
Senator Kahele.
I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Senator Gabbard.
Mr. President, the House amendments are reasonable and appropriate to improve our overall resiliency to climate change. Their amendments will, number one, require coastal-dependent development to consider the effects of coastal hazards and to plan and locate facilities to minimize exposure to coastal hazards. Number two, strengthen the protection of coastal areas by prohibiting shoreline structures in areas with sandy beaches unless the granting of a variance is clearly in the public interest. And number three, repurpose the definition of development in special management areas to regulate uses or activities that result in cumulative environmental effects or significant environmental or ecological effects.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Any objections? If not, the motion is carried. One-day notice is hereby given for final reading of SB 2060 HD2.
On page 4, House Communication Number 389 returns Senate Bill Number 2130, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1, relating to the State Fire Code. On page 6, House Communication Number 401 returns Senate Bill 2523, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 2, relating to public safety. And on page 6, House Communication Number 404 returns Senate Bill 2638, Senate Draft 2, House Draft 3, relating to domestic violence. These bills passed third reading in the House in an amended form, and therefore agree, disagree.
Senator Nishihara.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate agree to the amendments made by the House to Senate Bill 2130 SD1, Senate Bill 2523 SD1, and Senate Bill 2638 SD2.
Senator Kahele.
I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Senator Nishihara.
Thank you. Mr. President, for SB 2523, your Committee on Public Safety, Intergovernmental, and Military Affairs has agreed to adopt the proposed HD2 as proposed by the House Finance Committee, which would require the Department of Public Safety to expend certain appropriated funds during fiscal year 2020 and 21 solely for the community-based work furlough program for female inmates. This bill will save a great program at Fernhurst and all that they do to give women a second chance. And going on, Senate Bill 2130. We'd like to move to agree to these amendments made by Senate Bill 2130 by the House, which simply clarifies the State Fire Council's exemption from the Hawaii Administrative Procedures Act when adopting the State Fire Code, and some technical and non-substantive amendments. And finally, on Senate Bill 2638, the committee has agreed to amendments made to this Senate Bill 2638 by the House Judiciary and Finance Committees. These amendments include, number one, remove the language that would have included coercive control under the petty misdemeanor offense of an abuse of a family member or household member, and two, required courts to grant a motion for deferred acceptance of guilty plea to require offenders to complete domestic violence intervention programs or parenting classes if applicable, and three, removing language that would have enabled a person charged with a misdemeanor or petty misdemeanor offense or abuse of a family member or household member to plead no contest, and four, clarifying the court authorization to accept deferred acceptance of guilty pleas applies only if the defendant has no prior conviction or has not been granted a deferred acceptance of guilty plea for any offense or family or community or household member charged with the family court, regardless of the final plea. 5, standardized types of documents accepted as proof of domestic or sexual violence victim status. 6, specifying that certified or exemplified restraining orders rather than valid restraining orders and records or files of a court or government agency are documents that will be accepted as a proof of domestic or sexual violence victim status. And 7, allowing courts to impose a 1-year probationary period for a petty misdemeanor of abuse of a family or household members to ensure that defendants placed on probation will have sufficient time to complete mandatory terms imposed by the courts, that the probationary time is equal to the defendants placed on a period of deferral. And 8, changing the effective date to January 1st, 2021. And then 9, making technical and substantial amendments for the purposes of clarity, consistency, and style. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Any objections? If not, the motion is carried. 1-day notice is hereby given for final reading of Senate Bill 2130 HD1, Senate Bill 2523 HD2, and Senate Bill 2638 HD3.
On page 4, House Communication number 390 returns Senate Bill number 2139, House Draft 1, relating to vacancies, which passed third reading in the House in an amended form for agree-disagree.
Senator Thielen.
Thank you. I move that the Senate agree to the amendment by the House to SB 2139.
Senator Kaeli.
I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Senator Thielen.
Thank you, Mr. President. The House amendments basically set a cap on the number of days after the close of filing on which a candidate may withdraw from office. And then it makes it retroactive to conform with federal law and makes some technical non-substantive amendments. And I think these are improvements to the bill and recommend that we accept.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Any objections? If not, the motion is carried. 1-day notice is hereby given for final reading of Senate Bill 2139 HD1.
On page 4, House Communication number 391 returns Senate Bill number 2185, House Draft 1, relating to violation of privacy. On page 6, House Communication number 406 returns Senate Bill number 2844, Senate Draft 2, House Draft 2, making appropriations for claims against the state, its officers, or its employees. And also on page 6, House Communication number 403 returns Senate Bill number 2612, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1, relating to sports officials. And on page 8, House Communication number 415 Return Senate Bill number 3119, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 2, relating to statutory revision, amending or repealing various provisions of the Hawaii Revised Statutes or the session laws of Hawaii for the purposes of correcting errors and references, clarifying language, or deleting obsolete or unnecessary provisions. These bills passed third reading in the House in an amended form for agree, disagree.
Senator Rhodes.
I move that the Senate agree to the amendments made by the House to SB 2185, SB 2612, SD1, SB 2844, SD2, and SB 3119, SD1.
Senator Kelly.
I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Senator Rhodes.
On SB 2185 relating to privacy, the House has added a section on restricting government use of facial recognition technology. Considering the disruptions that we have undergone because of the pandemic, I believe this is a reasonable amendment and recommend that we accept it. For SB 2612 relating to sports officials, the penalties were made somewhat more stringent by the House, and I think those are reasonable amendments as well. SB 2844 relating to claims against the state, the House added appropriations for settlements and court-ordered payments of claims as requested by the Attorney General that came to fruition after it had passed over to the House. And finally, on SB 3119 relating to statutory revisions, minor technical amendments were made.
Thank you. It's been, is there any further discussion? Any objections? If not, the motion is carried. One-day notice is hereby given for final reading of SB 2185 HD1, SB 2612 HD1, SB 2844 HD2, and SB 3119 HD2.
On page 4, House Communication number 392 returns Senate Bill number 2193, House Draft 2, relating to employment discrimination. And on page 6, House Communication number 407 returns Senate Bill number 2866, Senate Draft 2, House Draft 2, relating to the Hawaii Employer Union Health Benefits Trust Fund Employee Beneficiary Monthly Contributions. These bills passed third reading in the House in an amended form for agree, disagree.
Senator Taniguchi.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate agree to the amendments made by the House to Senate Bill number 2193 and Senate Bill number 2866, Senate Draft 2.
Senator Kahele.
I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Senator Taniguchi.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 2193, House Draft 2, amends HRS Section 378-2.5, which limits when convictions may be used in employment decisions. Currently, all convictions may be used in the most recent 10 years. The amendments would change the use of felony convictions to those that occurred in the most recent 7 years and misdemeanor convictions that occurred in the most recent 5 years. Senate Bill 2193 HD2 reflects the agreement reached between the relevant House and Senate committees and would be effective upon approval. Senate Bill 2866, Senate Draft 2, House Draft 2, amends HRS Sections 87A-40 and 88-95. The measure requires newly retired employees and surviving employee beneficiaries to pay their share of the health benefit premium through monthly electronic deductions from the employee's retirement system, pension, or their financial institution. SB 2866 SD2 HD2 reflects the agreement reached by the relevant House and Senate committees and would be effective upon approval.
Is there any further discussion? Any objections? If not, the motion is carried. One-day notice is hereby given for final reading of Senate Bill 2193, House Draft 2, and Senate Bill 2866, House Draft 2.
On page 5, House Communication number 394 returns Senate Bill number 2262, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 2, relating to the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board. Also on page 5, House Communication number 400 returns Senate Bill number 2486, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1, relating to education data. And on page 7, House Communication number 413 returns Senate Bill number 3103, Senate Draft 2, House Draft 2, relating to a school facilities agency.
Senator Kidani.
I'm sorry, recess, please.
No objection, short recess.
Hey, everybody else. Can we hear you?
Madam Clerk?
We may heard public.
Senate's called back into order. Senator Kidani.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate agree to the amendments made by the House to Senate Bill number 2262 SD1, Senate Bill number 2486 SD1, and Senate Bill number 3103 SD2.
Senator Kahele.
I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Senator Kidani.
Thank you. Senate Bill 2262 offers private school teachers a voluntary pathway to teacher licensure. This bill also gives the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board the authority to extend the period of time an emergency hire teacher will have to obtain their teacher license in the event of a declared emergency.
Thank you. Is there,
I'm sorry. May I continue?
yes, I'm sorry.
Senate Bill 2486 requires the Department of Education to collect and report data on the suspension and expulsion rates of students by specific demographic breakout groups. This is an important step to ensuring that all of our students, regardless of who they are, have equitable access to education. Senate Bill 3103 HD2 establishes a school facilities agency that will be in charge of all future school construction, major renovations, and school redevelopment projects. This is a long time coming and is the first step to ensuring that our students have the best possible learning environments that our state can afford them. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Any objections? If not, the motion is carried. One-day notice is hereby given for final reading of SB 2262 HD2, SB 2486 HD1, and SB 3103 HD2.
On page 5, House Communication number 395 returns Senate Bill number 2275, Senate Draft 2, House Draft 2, relating to notarial acts. Also on page 5, House Communication number 399 returns Senate Bill number 2421, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1, relating to condominium associations. And on page 7, House Communication number 408 returns Senate Bill number 2871, Senate Draft 2, House Draft 3, relating to professional and vocational licensing trust funds. These bills passed third reading in the House in an amended form for agree-disagree.
Senator Baker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate agree to the amendments made by the House to Senate Bill 2275, Senate Draft 2, Senate Bill 2421, Senate Draft 1, and Senate Bill 2871, Senate Draft 2.
Senator Kahele.
I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Senator Baker.
Thank you, Mr. President. On Senate Bill 2275 relating to notarial acts, the House made an amendment that certainly addressed one of the testifiers' concern that the use of the phrase outside the United States was too broad, and we specify in this bill now what outside of the United States means. Basically, banks located in the Federated States of Micronesia, the Republic of the Marshall Islands, the Republic of Palau. We also note that the House inserted an effective date of January 1, 2021 to allow these amendments to be put into effect by notaries public. The second measure is Senate Bill 2421 relating to condominium associations. The HD1 inserted a retroactive effective date of June 29, 2020, as we thought that's would have been appropriate, and on getting a legal check, it's still a fine date, so the bill is clean. and we support everything that's in that measure that came over from the Senate, came out of the Senate rather. And the third bill is Senate Bill 2871, relating to professional vocational licensing trust funds. This measure clarifies the House amendments that this particular version of the licensing trust fund language supersedes any contrary amendments made to various recovery and education funds by Act 29 Session Laws of Hawaii in 2019, and made some other technical non-substantive amendments, such as making the funds on a biennial basis rather than on a biannual basis, and changing the effective date so that it is retroactive to July 1, 2020. Having our legal eagles look at it, these amendments from that standpoint are acceptable, as are the substantive amendments made by these measures, and I ask my colleagues to support.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Any objections? If not, the motion is carried. One-day notice is hereby given for final reading of SB 2275 HD2, SB 2421 HD1, and SB 2871 HD3.
On page 5, House Communication number 397 returns Senate Bill number 2384, Senate Draft 2, House Draft 2, relating to motor vehicles. On page 7, House Communication number 412 returns Senate Bill number 2993, House Draft 2, relating to commercial driver's licenses. And on page 8, House Communication number 416 returns Senate Bill number 3158, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1, relating to motor vehicles. These bills passed third reading in the House in an amended form for agree-disagree.
Senator Inouye.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate agree to the amendments made by the House to Senate Bill 2384, SD2, Senate Bill 2993, and SB 3158, Senate Draft 1.
Senator Kahele.
I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Senator Inouye.
Yes, Mr. President. SB 2384, I stand corrected. SB 2384, Senate Draft 2, House Draft 2. The Senate Committee on Transportation moved to agree to the changes made in the House. These changes include, quote, deleting language that would require certain tow operators to provide to a disabled vehicle's driver a written disclosure of certain information and an itemization of charges before attaching a disabled vehicle to the tow truck under certain circumstances, unquote. These changes are acceptable to both myself and the introducer of the bill. SB 2993, House Draft 2, the Committee on Transportation moves to agree to the changes made in the House. The change reflects an effective date of September 1st, 2020. Finally, SB 3158, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1, Mr. President, the Committee on Transportation moved to agree to the changes made in the House. The changes reflect an amendment suggested by the Prosecuting Attorney's Office to ensure consistency in the definitions in statute by changing the definitions of motor vehicles to airbag-required motor vehicle. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Any objections? If not, the motion is carried. One-day notice is hereby given for final reading of SB 2384 HD2, SB 2993 HD2, and SB 3158 HD1.
On page 5, House Communication number 398 returns Senate Bill number 2386, Senate Draft 2, House Draft 2, relating to waste management, which passed third reading in the House in an amended form for agree-disagree.
Senator Kahele.
I move that the Senate agree to the amendments made by the House to Senate Bill number 2386, Senate Draft 2.
Senator English.
I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Senator Kahele.
Yes, Mr. President. For Senate Bill 2386, Senate Draft 2, House Draft 2, the purpose is to prohibit any waste or disposal facility from being located in a conservation district except in emergency circumstances to mitigate significant risk to public safety and health. This bill requires no less than a 1/2 mile buffer zone around residences, schools, and hospitals for the construction, modification, or expansion of a waste or disposal facility, and it specifies that waste or disposal facility excludes individual state-certified non-industrial redemption centers. This measure was amended in the House by making inapplicable to federal agencies the prohibition on construction, operation, modification, expansion, or closure of a municipal solid waste landfill unit without first obtaining a permit from the Director of Health. Number 2, making inapplicable to federal agencies the prohibition on construction, modification, or expansion of a waste or disposal facility or construction and demolition landfill unit without a 1/2 mile buffer zone around residences, schools, and hospitals, making it effective upon approval, and making technical, non-substantive amendments for the purposes of clarity, consistency, and style. And the recommendation is to agree to Senate Bill 2386, Senate Draft 2, House Draft 2, sent over from the House.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Any objections? If not, the motion is carried. One-day notice is hereby given for final reading of Senate Bill 2386 HD2.
On page 6, House Communication Number 405 returns Senate Bill 2820, Senate Draft 2, House Draft 2, relating to renewable energy, which passed third reading in the House in an amended form for agree-disagree.
Senator Hawai'i.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate agree to the amendments made by the House to Senate Bill number 2820 SD2.
Senator Kahele.
I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Senator Hawai'i.
Yes, members, this bill simply provides a grandfather clause for the utility scale renewable projects that were given power purchase agreements prior to 2019.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Any objections? If not, the motion is carried. One-day notice is hereby given for final reading of Senate Bill 2820 HD2. Action on all other House communications listed on pages 2 to 8 on today's order of the day is deferred for one day.
On pages 8 through 15, Standing Committee Report numbers 3794 to 3809, and on page 21, Standing Committee Report numbers 3827 and 3828 for one-day notice.
So ordered.
On page 16 to 21, Standing Committee Report numbers 3810 to 3826 on Senate concurrent resolutions and Senate resolutions for adoption.
Senator Kahele.
I move for the adoption of Standing Committee Report number 3810 to 3826.
Senator Favela.
I second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Any objections? If not, the motion is carried. Said resolutions have been adopted. If there are no objections from the members, we'll take a brief recess.
Asking how many people's lower half matches their upper half.
Laura, we're going to go back into order.
Laura.
Will the Senate please come back into order, Madam Clerk?
We're on page 22, Deferred Matters. House Communication number 383 returns Senate Bill number 2920, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1, relating to conformity to the Internal Revenue Code, which passed third reading in the House in an amended form for agree-disagree.
Senator Dela Cruz.
I move that the Senate agree to the amendments made by the House to Senate Bill 2920 SD1.
Senator Cahelli.
I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Senator De La Cruz?
This conformity measure is provided by Dole Tax annually. It complies with sections of the HRS which requires the department to submit a bill each session to maintain state income tax conformity with federal IRS code.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Any objections? If not, the motion is carried. One-day notice is hereby given for final reading of Senate Bill 2920 HD1.
House Communication Number 373 returns Senate Bill Number 2629, Senate Draft 2, House Draft 1, relating to the environment, which passed third reading in the House in an amended form for agree-disagree.
Senator Cahelli.
I move that the Senate agree to the amendments made by the House to Senate Bill number 2629, Senate Draft 2.
Senator English.
I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Senator Cahelli.
Hey, colleagues, Senate Bill 2629, Senate Draft 2, House Draft 1's purpose is to ensure that the use of coal in Hawaii for electricity production is eliminated by 1, prohibiting the Public Utilities Commission from approving after June 30th, 2020, a new, modified, or renewed power purchase agreement for electricity generated from coal, and 2, prohibiting the Department of Health from issuing or renewing after December 31st, 2022, covered source air permits for coal-burning electricity generation facilities. This measure was amended by the House by 1, specifying that the PUC prohibition on approving a modification of a power purchase agreement applies to coal power purchase agreements that extend the term or increase the amount of generation allowed to be produced under the existing agreement, and it makes this measure effective upon approval. And I move to agree to Senate Bill 2629, Senate Draft 2, House Draft 1, sent over from the House.
Is there any further discussion? Any objections? If not, the motion is carried. One-day notice is hereby given for final reading of Senate Bill 2629 HD1.
On pages 22 and 23, advise and consent.
If there are no objections from the members, we will be taking advise and consent on consent.
Standing Committee Report Numbers 3790 and 3791 on Governor's messages for adoption.
Is there any discussion? Senator Baker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in strong support of Governor's Message 3790, submitting for confirmation 3 members to the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. Your committee heard these governor's messages, found that the nominees were well qualified to serve, and I ask my colleagues to support them.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, do we have unanimous consent?
22 ayes.
Thank you. The nominees for said governor's messages have been confirmed.
On pages 23 and 24, adoption of resolutions. Standing Committee Report Numbers 3792 and 3793 on Senate Concurrent Resolution Number 49, Senate Draft 1, and Senate Resolution Number 28, Senate Draft 1 for adoption.
If there are no objections from the members, said resolutions and standing committee reports are recommitted to the Committees on Energy, Economic Development, and Tourism, and Waterland.
On page 24, Senate Concurrent Resolution Numbers 27 and 28 for adoption.
Senator Cahelli.
I move for the adoption of Senate concurrent resolutions number 27 and 28.
Senator Favela.
Second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Any objections? If not, the motion is carried. Said resolutions have been adopted.
Beginning on page 25, final reading.
If there are no objections from the members, we will be taking final reading on consent.
Final reading of Senate Bill 2877, House Draft 2, relating to mental health counselors.
Is there any discussion? If not, do we have unanimous consent?
22 ayes.
Thank you. Senate Bill number 2877, HD2, passes final reading.
Final reading of Senate Bill 2878, House Draft 2, relating to massage therapy.
Is there any discussion? If not, do we have unanimous consent?
22 ayes.
Thank you. Senate Bill 2878, HD2, passes final reading.
Final reading of Senate Bill 3054, House Draft 1, relating to firearm registration.
Is there any discussion? Senator Favela.
And Mr. President, I raise in opposition.
Please proceed.
I raise in opposition to this bill. I feel that it's not necessary, and then I want to add my comments into the journal.
So ordered. Further discussion? If not, do we have unanimous consent? No vote for Senators Favela and Riviere. Any reservations?
20 ayes, 2 noes.
Thank you. Senate Bill 3054 HD1 passes final reading.
Final reading of Senate Bill 2701, House Draft 2, relating to agricultural buildings.
Is there any discussion? If not, do we have unanimous consent?
22 ayes.
Thank you. Senate Bill 2701 HD2 passes final reading.
Referrals and re-referrals.
Referrals and re-referrals are made in accordance with the supplemental order of the day, which may be distributed to your offices later today.
No further business, Mr. President.
Are there any announcements today? If not, Senator Kahele.
I move that the Senate stand adjourned until 12 o'clock p.m. on Friday, July 10th.
Senator Favela.
I second that motion.
It has been moved and seconded. If there are no objections from the members, the Senate will stand adjourned until noon Friday.